Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Digital Transformation in the Housing Sector. My name is Chris Buller, and I work here at AMS. But my job here really today is to introduce our two presenters, and that's Damien Robbins and Simon Godfrey. Now, Damien's been with us here at AMS for about 18 years, and he's got a huge amount of experience when it comes to implementing document management solutions into businesses, but part of a digital transformation project. And we're very lucky to be joined by Simon Godfrey from DocuWare as well. Now, like Damien, Simon's got a lot of experience when it comes to implementing solutions into businesses for digital transformation projects, but also has a great deal of experience when it comes to working with organizations in the housing sector. Now, the way that the webinar is going to go today is that Simon's going to start us off with a couple of slides talking about some of his experiences and some of the challenges that he's come across with organizations in the housing sector. And then Damien's going to take us through a bit of a demo of DocuWare, where we're going to start to address some of these challenges. So if I pass you over to Simon, and I'll then come back and introduce Damien's demo.
Thanks, Chris. My name's Simon Godfrey, and I look after partners like AMS for the company DocuWare. And today I've joined the guys to discuss how DocuWare can potentially help in the social housing space. And we're going to start by going through a few slides. The first one is throwing a spotlight on information, compliance, GDPR, and mainly our people. Now, when we look at compliance and GDPR, these are coming very, very key in the workspace these days. Information needs to be readily available, and we need to make sure that we're keeping the right information for the right periods of time. We're starting to see instances of ambulance chaser firms, for a matter of words, that would be going out there and looking to try and get claims. And I suppose in the housing sector, you would look at disrepair being one of those, where the process is being put under scrutiny. So making sure that we can source the right information, that the processes have all been done correctly, and making sure that we can deliver the information we need as and when, so that we're not out of step in terms of those claims. But also things like gas safety certificates. And I know that Damien's going to touch on that as part of the demonstration that he does later on. Making sure that housing associations are up to date with gas safety certificates, EPCs, those sorts of things is really, really, really important when it comes to a compliance and governance point of view. I mean, from my understanding, the average fine for a breach of a gas safety certificate is about £10,000 per property. And I suppose in really, really strict cases as well, that the CEO is open to prosecution, and we don't want that. So we need to make sure that the information that we have in store is the right information, it's up to date, and it's in date. And we can do that by utilizing tools like DocuWare to help us do those processes. Now, the last bit I want to talk about on this bit is people, and people are key. We have grown up, or my son certainly has grown up in the last 26 years with technology, used to having the internet, used to having smartphones and information at your fingertips. I mean, let's be honest, now we can bank through our mobile phone, we can do shopping through our mobile phone, we can have food delivered through an app to our front door, all through the touch of a button on our phone. And people get a little bit annoyed when we go to a business and say, I'd like a copy of something like a tenancy agreement, and it takes minutes if not hours for us to bring that information back because it's not stored where we'd want it to be, or it's in a paper file. And that really, really starts to infuriate our customers, and we don't want that. We want happy customers. But at the same time, the people that have grown up with the tech are now coming into our workplaces. And they don't want to be in a position where somebody is shouting at them and telling them that they should have this information quickly because, let's be honest, we can order something in Amazon on seconds. So we want to make sure that our employees have the best experience. So we can utilize technology to seamlessly integrate with the applications that we use and connect those. So if somebody says, can I have some information? It's almost like doing a Google search within your business to bring that information back quickly. We end up with happy employees and then happy tenants. Now, I touched earlier on about systems not being connected and paper documents taking time to find. And this is something that we look at and we think this is something called content chaos. And that's a term I've made up anyway. And it's not just housing associations that suffer from this, most businesses do. Because what we tend to find, and we're talking specifically about housing at the moment, is associations grow by acquisition. You bring in smaller organizations, or in some cases bigger organizations, into your group, but that then brings inherent technology with them. So you can have multiple housing management systems, multiple asset systems. Maybe there's a legacy DMS in there, but most times, most people are working in things like 365, utilizing Teams. Network folders are criminal. The worst, of course, is email, because we all like to share information by email. If I was to send an email to the 20 people that we've got on this call at the moment, I could send a Word document out to all of us. There'd be 20 copies of that information that I've sent out, and everybody would have a copy of it. They'd probably stick it in a folder on their desktop that meant something to them. Now, let's say the one of the people that I sent it out to was Damien, and Damien decided he was going to change that document and then send that back out to the group. There's now 40 versions of that document knocking around, and we need to make sure that we've got the right information at the right time. So we go back to that compliance piece, making sure that when somebody says, "Can I see my gas safety certificate?" that we're showing them the right certificate. So we need to look at ways in which we can connect all this information, bring the paper into a digital file cabinet, allow people to be able to work remotely. Having information that's sourceable on a laptop or a mobile phone or a tablet when you're sat down with one of your tenants is absolutely key. So we need to think smarter when it comes to information management. And we've said already, information sits at the heart of everything we do. And it sits in those housing management systems, and it sits in the legacy DMSs, it sits in network folders, it sits in Office 365, and it sits in paper all over the place. And what we want to do is we want to use technology to enhance and digitize and surface information quicker. And that goes back to that information on a mobile phone. If I'm sitting with my tenant and I've got my tablet or my mobile with me, I can search for the tenancy document, their EPCs, any antisocial behavior documents that are in the system that relate to them. So I can show them in real time the information that we hold. So that allows us to free up time to focus on adding value. And that's mainly to helping our tenants, because if we've got happy tenants, our job is so much easier. We manage to keep our tenants for longer, we manage to keep our employees for longer, and it all comes down to making sure that we've got what we need at our fingertips at all time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Damien and Chris to run you back through the rest of the demonstration, and I'm here for any questions if needed.
Thanks, Simon. Some really interesting points there. So we're going to just quickly introduce the demo for Damien. So we're going to start off by looking at DocuWare as a digital archive to really simplify the management of these documents relating to properties and to tenants. We're then going to touch on compliance, where we'll look at workflow and look at different ways of managing important documents such as gas safety and EICR certificates. We also want to touch on some of the functionality around process automation, where we can look at the workflow module within DocuWare and look at ways that we can speed up tasks and improve our relationships with tenants. And we're going to tie it all together with a quick purchase invoice authorization process at the end for works completed by contractors. So, Damien, if you're okay to share your screen and take everyone through the demo.
So, as you can see, DocuWare is a web-based application, so you can access this from any device as long as you have an internet connection. It's important to say that DocuWare is completely customizable. So what I'm about to demo is just some things that I've configured to show off some of the features and functionality in the platform. There are also mobile apps that make it easy to access documents when, say, you're out and about, maybe with your tenants, and also perform workflow tasks without needing your computer. So as a starting point, DocuWare can be used as a simple digital archive for documents relating to properties, tenants, and contractors. So if I go ahead and start storing some documents, for instance, we have a gas safety record here that we've received via email, and we can just right-click that and use the DocuWare integration with Outlook just to store gas safety record. We can also import documents into our document tray. So this is generally where you'll capture documents before you go ahead and store them. And we've got some general correspondence here that we could go ahead and store. So when you're storing a document, you'll use index values in the same way that you might file something in a filing cabinet under a property name or maybe in chronological order. We can do the same thing with index values. And these are really useful for searching, but also maybe making a decision or triggering a workflow later. So we can choose from a list. We can also use DocuWare's kind of point and click just to highlight information so we don't have to type it. And just click on store. If we go over to the gas safety tab, so here's the gas safety record that we just stored from Outlook. I'm also going to import some files from a network directory. So if I open up that network directory, now this could be a watch folder on your network where you've scanned them in from a network scanner or an MFD, and DocuWare can watch that folder, capture the documents, move them over to the document tray, and also use something called intelligent indexing. Now, obviously, I use these documents a bit for demos and things like that, so they're all green, but this is a traffic light system. The DocuWare AI, intelligent indexing, will turn a picture or a document into data. It then tries to understand the patterns so that it can figure out which piece of information you want to use in order to make that whole store process really quick and easy. So I'm just going to change my view because I'm going to do this in a bit of an order, which we'll see why later. So I'm just going to grab these. You can see this is the one that I stored from Outlook, and I can go ahead and store. And this is where you can see the benefits of intelligent indexing. Whereas before I had to point and click to capture the information, DocuWare has figured out the pattern and understood which piece of information I want to capture. And you can see it highlighted on the right-hand side. So visually, we can just go through, check the information is correct. I've also got a tag here for whether something requires remedial action. I'm going to say yes on this one. And again, the reason will become apparent later. It's going to trigger a workflow. But we can have a look through and again, just make sure the information is correct. But the idea is that the intelligent indexing AI in DocuWare just makes that whole process really quick and easy to store documents. So now that you've stored documents, you might want to find them. And this is one of the key features of DocuWare. And Simon touched on it earlier, just having one copy that multiple people can refer to. And you can use the search tab here. Now you can create kind of simple search dialogues, or maybe you can create more detailed search dialogues. It's up to you really, but I've just got a simple one here. And I'm going to choose a particular document type. Maybe pick an address. But within a couple of clicks, we can go straight to that document. We can also have a look at the history of a document if it's been involved in a particular workflow. And we also have a full audit trail of everything that's happened to that document. Another clever thing that DocuWare does is it turns documents into data. So if you can't think of an index value, maybe you can think of something that's in the content of that document. So if I look for a word, I'm going to look for Albert. Again, I can go straight to that document and DocuWare will highlight that particular word. You probably noticed there's a kind of red dot with a number in it next to lists, and these are just saved searches. And it's a great way to maybe, if you're running a search regularly, like on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, so you don't have to enter in the information in a search dialog, or it's just a good way of keeping an eye of documents as they're coming through in the system. So you can see here we've got some gas safety records that are due in the next month, and the current ones. And also we've got the one here that requires remedial action that we stored earlier. If you like folders, we can also create, now again, this is a difficult concept to explain, but these are virtual folders. So rather than having like fixed folders in a network directory, we're just using index values to create a folder type view. So you can see I've got documents by document type, documents by property address, and I've got documents by tenant. So I could maybe have a look at a particular tenant. I could see each of the properties that they've been in, and I could maybe look at the documents related to that particular property. So again, it's just an easy way to browse the information and find the documents you're looking for. You could also use your mobile for this type of things. So really helpful, let's say a property services officer goes to meet one of your tenants and you need to access a particular document. You could grab that document, choose the address, and again, within a couple of clicks, you've got the document straight in front of you. So really handy if you're talking to your tenant and you're out and about, you can access the information you need just from your mobile phone. So as you can see, lots of people just use DocuWare as a secure digital archive to prevent multiple copies stored in different locations and improve access to that information. However, you can also really leverage the tools in DocuWare to automate a lot of your tasks and save huge amounts of time, and also ensure that things get done in a certain way. For instance, we can look at where DocuWare can help maintain compliance for gas safety records, and this is a key thing for a lot of the housing associations we talk to. Now, earlier, one of the gas safety records we stored needed remedial work. And if we go back to our lists, we can see the ones that are due, the ones that are current, and the one that requires remedial work. If I go into my email, I can see that DocuWare has emailed me. And again, you can make this as dynamic as you like. I'm using some fields. So you can see here the subject field, gas safety, remedial action, works order required. Please raise a gas safety works order. We've got the address, we've got the tenant name. We've got a link directly to the document. And you can also attach the document to the email notification as well. But I'm just going to go into my tasks. We can see here, here's my task. I need to raise a works order. Now, for some housing associations, you might do this in your housing application. In here, I'm just going to do it in DocuWare just to show what's possible. And I'm going to choose a contractor. So this is gas safety. So I'm going to choose plumbing and heating, choose a date, and click on confirm. So the reason I'm choosing some of these fields is because they're index values that I might want to report on later or use to trigger some kind of workflow action. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is, let's say the contract has been assigned, they've attended the property, and we now have a whole new bunch of gas safety records. So here they are. I'm going to go ahead and store these. So none of these require remedial action now. George's property has been updated. And we can just run through all of these and go ahead and store them. Now, what's going to happen in the background is DocuWare is going to take a look at the new gas safety records, have a look at the existing gas safety records for those properties, see if the new one replaces the old one, and then mark the old ones as expired. So if we go to our lists now, we should hopefully see that starting to happen. So we now don't have any gas safety records that are due. We now have 4 gas safety records that are current, and there are none that require remedial action now. And if you wanted to, anytime you do a list or create a search, you can export this information as a CSV file. So if you wanted to do some kind of further analysis, or maybe you wanted to share that information with somebody else, we can open this up, and you've got the information in a familiar format. Now next we're going to look at forms, and this is a really useful feature in DocuWare, and it helps to maybe improve engagement with your tenants or your contractors, but you can make these forms public or private. And to illustrate how this can work, we're going to look at a tenant raising a property fault. So we've got a web form here for housing fault claim. But also, as more and more people use their mobile phones, you could do this from your mobile. So let's open up my mobile on my screen. So let's say I'm John and I want to raise a fault claim for my property. And again, each of these boxes can become an index value, and you can use it to make a choice. So for this particular fault claim, it's electrical. Now we could trigger a workflow to alert the team that deals with electrical faults. We can also maybe use the address to see who the property services officer is for that particular address or scheme, or however that might work for you. We can also upload some files. So I'm going to take a picture of my broken socket and I can type a description, but again, this is completely customizable. You can decide what information you want to capture, how you want it to look. These are just some of the things that I've put together as an example. Now, the great thing with using the forms is we're going to trigger a workflow task. And if I get rid of my phone, we'll see that we now have an email reminding me that there is a fault claim that's been received from John for 1 Evergreen Terrace. And again, you can have the fault claim attached if you wanted to. And there's a link to the fault claim. But the idea is to reduce those bottlenecks in that process and get the contractor assigned as quickly as possible. So again, I'm going to assign to a contractor. While I'm here, actually, I'm just going to show you we have some supplier records. So effectively, DocuWare is kind of looking up these supplier records. It could look up something else. So if you have a database or a spreadsheet of kind of approved suppliers, you could use that as well. But I'm just going to go into here, have a look at the fault claim. We can have a look at the picture, see what's gone on with poor John's broken plug socket, and we could make a decision. So I'm going to assign a contractor. We could maybe assign a works order number. And again, these are just some things that I've thought about. Maybe you match the invoice that comes into the works order number, maybe do some kind of validation, maybe also check the amount. Maybe you've got a quote from the contractor to do the work, and we'll click on confirm. Now, a typical situation might be John phones up or he sends in an email saying, what's going on, what's happened with my fault claim. So if we have a look in my email, we can see here's the email from John, what's happening with my broken plug socket. And again, I'm just showing off another feature of DocuWare that can be really useful, but this is what's called highlight search. So I've created a short key combination, Control, Shift, and T. And I've highlighted John's name, and DocuWare is going to perform a search for the documents relating to John. So now we can see the documents that relate to John. We can have a look at John's fault claim. If I zoom in a bit, we can see the stamp from the workflow action. We can see who's been, what contractor has been assigned to the works. We could also have a look at the history and have a look at the information here. But very quickly, we can answer John's question. We can go back to him and reassure him of what's going to happen next. Now, if we go back to my email, we'll also see DocuWare has had a look to see who the contractor is, the contact name of the contractor, and has automatically emailed them to say, dear contact name, company name, could you arrange the works to resolve an issue for tenant name at address with the works order number and the quoted amount and a copy of the fault claim as well if they need it. Now, the next thing to do would be to mark the works as complete. I can set a completed date. I'm just going to do a few days in the future, and I'll show you why in a moment. But again, because these are index values that I'm capturing, I can use them to do something else later, maybe run a report. If you have KPIs, having a look at how long it's taken to resolve your fault claims. So that piece of information might be quite useful. So if I go to my lists, let me just get rid of the GSR information. So you can see we have another list, fault claims this month. So I can see there's been 2. I could export this information as a CSV file. So now we can see all of the information that we've captured during the process of that fault claim. You'll also notice when the contract was assigned, when the works were completed, how many days that were taken to resolve that fault claim. So you could do some kind of analysis so that we can see 4 days over 2 fault claims, so an average of 2 days to resolve. But that information might be useful for you guys to do some kind of analysis later. So now we can go ahead and store the invoice. So here we've got the invoice for the works. I can go ahead and store that to the intelligent indexing tray. And again, this is where the kind of DocuWare AI is going to take over, turn the document into data, and try and help me store that as quickly as possible. So we can see it's been captured. I'm also going to store a couple of other invoices so that we can see maybe how DocuWare handles invoices that don't have a matching or a corresponding works order number. Maybe it's a new supplier, so we can show some kind of matching and validation there as well. So we go ahead and store these. Like we did earlier, we can click on the relevant fields. We can check them on the right-hand side in the document viewer, check the order numbers correct, check the amounts match, maybe add some notes, and click on store. You notice these other ones, so this is ABC electrical rather than AMS electrical. The amounts still match, but this will trigger a supplier mismatch. And we'll notice this one, it's using the old order number, so let's just make sure we've got the right one. And again, this is how you teach the AI engine to kind of capture the information correctly. And we'll just, again, add this. So you notice that one of these will go straight through to pay because there's a corresponding works order with the correct works order number and the amounts match. One, the works order didn't match, so that will put it through an approval process. And one had a supplier mismatch, so it will kind of trigger a task to maybe create a new supplier or change the supplier name. So we can go into our lists. And we can see, here's the invoice that's ready to be paid. And again, we can have a look at the history. And if you have a look at the automatic entries, you can see the matching process and the value checking, that kind of thing. If we go to our tasks, we can see here we've got one for assigning an approver or a property services officer. So we can do that now. Here's the one with a supplier mismatch. So we could maybe correct the supplier name or enter in a new one. I'm just going to correct it. Let's say we mistyped it when we stored it and resubmit it for checking. Now, I mentioned earlier that you can also do workflow actions from your mobile phone. So if I open up my mobile, we can see here we now have a task. We have an invoice approval task as well. And this is really useful. Let's say you're a PSO or a finance manager. We can have a look and see, okay, this is for John. We know this was to fix his broken plug socket. We can say, yes, this is okay. Make a decision, approve that, find a place with a stamp, and click on confirm. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but the task was removed from the list on the left-hand side, and now all we've got to do is to confirm these invoices for payment. So we can just go ahead and maybe multi-select those because we're running a batch payment run on a Friday. Click on confirm, and that's done. So hopefully that's raised some ideas where the functionality of DocuWare could be customized to work with your processes. Now I'll hand you back to Chris.
Great, thanks, Damien. Some really interesting points there. So just to summarize some of the points that we've seen on the demo and some of the points brought up in Simon's slides as well. So first off, we saw DocuWare being used as a digital archive, where of course we can centralize the access and probably more importantly, the security around those documents. And we can use functionality such as document retention periods and version control. But the main benefit here really is that we get to cut down on misfiling and mistakes. And we also got to look at some of the functionality around the workflow, where we're looking at managing the compliance for documents such as gas safety certificates and EICRs. And we're able to speed up the processing time of these documents. And maybe more importantly, monitor and proactively manage this process. I think the most important factor when we come to work on any digital transformation project, whether it's in the housing sector or not, is the people and relieving the stress on those people. And if we can use DocuWare to configure automated workflows and some of the decisions are automated within DocuWare, we can really empower people to make their own decisions with confidence. And of course, the knock-on effect of this is it gives them the ability to be more proactive when they're managing these processes. So hopefully you found that webinar useful. We're just coming to the end and we've just got a parting quote from another housing association using DocuWare. And DocuWare is our core document management solution and sits between and integrates with our key business systems. It is central to all of our document management. And I suppose what we're really saying here, and maybe what the housing association is saying, is that we've only just scratched the surface of DocuWare here. So if you do have a particular process or a particular department in mind, and you think, well, you know, they haven't covered this, or we can't cater for this process, I would say it's definitely worth asking the question. So thanks again for your time. If you do want to get in contact, there are some contact details up on the screen now. Of course, if you do have an account manager already, please feel free to reach out. And you'll notice throughout the webinar, there was a box on the right. So if you do have any questions at this stage, please feel free to type them in now, and we will do our best to come back to you on those as soon as we can. But thanks again for your time, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.